And
Okay, so I think somebody must have given me your email address. And then, yes, I think now I've just been sending it forward. So yeah, that's perfect.
okay, yeah, my name is Carl, by the way.
Knowing that you're already,
C for this.
and your last name is pronounced
It's actually pronounced Pierce.
Pierce.
It's like Pires. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get the meeting started. Call it to order. It is 5:30. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, esteemed our guests tonight and fellow Toastmasters. I'm gonna pass it over to our Sergeant at Arms to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ron.
Thank you, Madam President. If you would all please stand and repeat along with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated.
Thank you, Rob. Tonight, I am excited to introduce our Toastmaster of the day, Fabiola.
Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to be this evening's Toastmaster. And I would like to just address that we do have some changes to our agenda. We do have two individuals that are not able to join us this evening. Therefore, our grammarian is Barbara. Perfect. And our AHA counter is Barbara as well. Okay, she's doing double duty tonight. Perfect. Thank you, Barbara. Do we have a joke of the day to? Great. Thank you, Pat. Can you please step forward and present us the joke of the day?
Just a short one, but it just cracked me up when I read it. Okay. I had been teaching my 3-year-old daughter, Caitlin, the Lord's Prayer for several evenings at bedtime. She would repeat after me the lines from the prayer. Finally, she decided to go solo. I listened with pride as she carefully enunciated each word right up to the end of the prayer. Lead us not into temptation, she prayed, but deliver us from email.
Good one. Perfect. Thank you so much, Pat. And this evening, we do have a guest joining us this evening, Carl. Carl, welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And with that, I will introduce this evening's general evaluator, Mr. Rob.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. I have assembled a crack team of professional amateurs. Is that an oxymoron?
Probably.
Professional amateurs to help me with the meeting roles this evening. Starting with our evaluator, who will be evaluating Jacob's speech. Please welcome Lloyd Smith.
It would be a good idea if all of us kind of explained our roles a little bit so that Carl's not left totally puzzled.
That's
Great. I'll be the evaluator for Jacob's speech tonight. Jacob is doing his icebreaker speech. And as you might imagine, the purpose of an icebreaker speech is exactly that, introducing himself to the group. His speech will be 4 to 6 minutes. I've lost track of who the timer is. It's Vicky, right? 4 to 6 minutes. The purpose of the icebreaker, according to the evaluation form, is for the member to introduce him or herself to the club and learn the basic structure of speaking, of a speech. This is Jacob. It's not really Jacob's first speech, but it's his first formal speech in the program. The goal is to give the member an effective evaluation of his or her speech and delivery style. Okay? Yes. Okay. Jacob's title tonight is Convergent Evolution. So we look forward to hearing what that's going to be about.
great. Thank you, Lloyd. I was remiss in explaining my role as a general evaluator. Not only is my role to assemble this crack team that will be presenting this evening, but it's also my role to evaluate the meeting as a whole. So at the end of the meeting tonight, I will give you my perspective of how well the meeting went. Next on my team is our timer. Vicki, would you please explain to us what your role is this evening?
I will, Mr. General Evaluator. The role of timer is to help people gauge the time of their speeches. It would be nice if people were able to just speak on and on and on if they wanted to, but sometimes in meetings, we are time bound. And so by able to know how long it takes us to present different types of speeches, that is a very helpful tool. Jacob's speech is the icebreaker, and that is 4 to 6 minutes. And so at 4, you will get the green. At 5, you will get the yellow. And at 6, you will get the red. We also have table topics, which will be explained later as to what those are. Those are 1 to 2 minutes. So 1, 1.5, and 2. And then our evaluator for the speech will have 2 to 3 minutes to give the evaluation. 2, 2.5, and 3. At the end, I will give my report as to how we did on time. And I just also wanted to mention Toastmasters have speech contests, and you are bound by those times as well. And if you go over or under, you are disqualified. So timing is very important in Toastmasters. Back to you, Mr. General Evaluator.
Thank you very much, Vicki. The nice thing about our meeting is that there are very few time constraints that you will be punished for. However, you do want to try and meet those time constraints as much as possible. Also on our team this evening, with a couple of roles, but starting with the grammarian. Would you please tell us what your role is, Barbara?
I would be happy to. Thank you. The purpose of the awe counter is to note words and sounds that are used as a crutch or a pause filler by anyone who speaks. During the meeting, I will listen for overused words, including and, well, but, so, and my favorite, you know. I will also listen for filler sounds, including and I will also note when a speaker repeats a word or a phrase, such as I, or in repetition of a phrase. As the grammarian, I'm going to note great use of the English language, or maybe sometimes really bad use of the English language. And I will have my report at the end of the meeting when called upon.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Barbara. She did combine both her roles in her presentation. Thank you very much for doing that.
Rob, it's Kathleen up here on the screen.
Hi, Kathleen.
Does Barbara need help with odd counting, or is she good? I'm happy to do it if she needs a break.
Kathleen, you can take either one.
I'll do odd counting. I have to print it out, but it'll just take me a second.
Okay, well,
Okay.
thank you for
Thank you for
stepping up,
volunteering.
Kathleen. That's very helpful. While you're printing that out, I would like to turn the meeting back over to our Toastmaster, Fabiola Barbosa.
Thank you. And just to define my role, once again, as Toastmaster, I am basically the MC of the evening, making sure that we are transitioning from one topic to another throughout our agenda and making sure that we are also within our time frame of our agenda. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce this evening's speaker, Jacob. He will once again be talking about his topic for his icebreaker is Convergent Evolution, the intersection of two timelines. Jacob.
Hey, Jacob.
Hello, thank you, Madam Toastmaster. I would first like to say I have never done a speech over Zoom, and so this is a little different, but I will do my best. So let's begin. In 1881, Richard Owens proposed the idea of convergent evolution a few years after Charles Darwin published On the Origin of Species. His observation was that distantly related animals could develop similar features and traits over time to better suit their environments, completely independent of each other. Animals like sharks and dolphins developed fins to swim in the ocean, while birds and bats developed wings to take flight. Separated across time and space, these animals reached an intersection in form and function, and they were able to successfully survive in their environments for millennia. Despite being from vastly different backgrounds and families, they were able to thrive and they were able to live. On September the 23rd of 2020, two men met at a bar called Rico's. It was a chilly night in Pullman and everybody was bundled up warmly. The two men agreed to meet at 6:30 because they both had some driving to do and it was wintry, so they wanted to be sure to be on time. One of the men arrived 15 minutes early, a habit he had picked up from his father, while the other man arrived exactly on time, which was a habit he had picked up from his father. They introduced each other and smiled. Sitting down, the awkward silence seemed to slowly swallow them up until something neither of them quite expected happened. They talked. The young man from Idaho told the young man from Illinois about how he had moved home last year and how he had left his small town in Idaho for the big city of Houston, Texas. You know, he had left Idaho for the chance to escape the doldrums and monotony of small town life. In Texas, he was able to find out that he could be whatever he wanted, whoever he wanted. And instead, and quite by surprise, he ended up being himself, his authentic self. So when the time came that he was able to come back to Idaho, he wasn't really disappointed. He was pleased. He was no longer a boy running away from his life. He was a man who had come home with acceptance in his heart. The young man from Illinois took a long sip from his old-fashioned and smiled warmly. He understood, although in an opposite and equal direction. He had left Chicago to pursue graduate school out west. He loved the mountains and the rivers and found he could be himself. Away from his family, he could learn and see and do as much as he wanted. He paused here and took another swig from his drink and looked at his dinner partner. He had a secret and no one knew it yet. That was the real reason he had left. He couldn't be himself, but moving away had been a start. He would have to make do with that. 1 hour bled into another, and then another, until the bar lights dimmed and the green neon sign was flicked off. The pair was forced to take their talk outside, and walking down a side street, they found a little canal behind a busy downtown. They followed it, walking alongside each other, their breath floating into the air. They came across a small wooden trestle bridge. Yellow lights flickered and danced dreamily down, and the two shared another smile, and then a kiss. This was the convergence of two lives that had developed and evolved separately until a point when the two timelines intersected and became one. If they were to walk backward through time, you would find another similar moments that seemed consequential at the time, but that were essential to their growth to become the young man sitting together at dinner. Tiny moments that led to bigger ones, and then eventually led to their final destination. Their experiences that led them there were vastly different, and one might think that such different backgrounds couldn't possibly be compatible. Yet somehow, like dolphins and sharks, they took similar form and function. They found in themselves and each other that which all animals look for, a reason to live. Okay, thank you. I'm so sorry, I'm really nervous. Oh.
Great job, Jacob. Thank you for that. Thank you. Timer, may we please have, I believe we decided to have 2 minutes now for evaluations.
Yep.
We could please have 2 minutes. Thank you.
So those on Zoom can private message Jacob their evaluations. And those who are in the live room, if you want to maybe email Jacob or save them for him or how you want to do it. I'm not sure how to get those to him other unless you want to take turns on the computer, but we'll have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Vicki, for that clarification.
You're evaluating.
I see.
I forgot to give the word of the day. I completely
Oh, that's okay.
flew past it.
Well, you can do that just before you introduce the topics.
I'm not introducing it. No,
Well, that's how you want it. I'm sorry.
it's okay. We don't have to have a word of the day. Do you want me to?
Yeah, we can get
Okay.
rid of it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty consistent, right? Year to year. This is good. Good feel. Good. So so it's not just when Ashley do that, I know this Jacobs from Slate. Is it when Ashley mostly, or are there other areas involved?
We have something from her.
Yes, generally it's the Wenatchee area, however, we do have members that live in areas where there isn't a big club. For example, Jacob lives in Moses Lake where there's no longer. There's not one in Winthrop, so normally we have one of our.
And go ahead and wrap up your thoughts. That is the time.
But other than Jacob, everybody on the screen is here.
Back to you, Fabiola.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Vicki. Once again, this evening, we will have table topics, and our theme this evening is choices in life. And we have Miss Pat, who is wonderful at providing us different questions to challenge us and give us an opportunity to respond within 1 to 2 minutes. Thank you.
Very kind of you, Fabiola. Thank you very much. Our theme tonight was choices in life. So the questions that I chose, and for everyone's information, the table topics are opportunities for extemporaneous speaking. I share the question with you, you respond, and you have 2 minutes to embroider it or do whatever you want to do with it. Okay, so, I think I'll start with Rob. Okay, Rob, what's one piece of advice you would go back and tell your younger self?
Thank you, table topics master. If I had an opportunity to speak to my younger self, it would be to listen to my parents and accept the fact that they were doing what was best in my life. There were choices that I wanted to make in my life, if my parents had allowed me, would have been detrimental to me in later life. For example, when I was 19, I worked on the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. I was making so much money as a 19-year-old, I told my parents, I'm not going back to college. I'm staying up here and I'm going to make so much money so that I don't actually have to go and finish college. They said, absolutely not. You are going to go to college and you're coming back next week. That would have been a bad choice if I had been allowed to make it. However, in life, I discovered later in life that there were choices that I wanted to make that were not so good, but there were choices that I did make, which were great for me in later life. For example, when I was a sophomore at WSU, I was having way too much fun. I wasn't learning anything. I personally made the choice that I was going to go to a more academic school. So I left WSU, where all my friends were, where I had really created some wonderful relationships, and went to a school where I knew nobody and actually got an education. So there are choices, good and bad, that I made when I was younger. I guess I'm really not answering the question. What would I tell my younger self? Listen to your parents. They've been through a lot of this. They understand what's good for you when you're growing up. Be respectful. Do as your parents tell you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kathleen, if you had to live in another country, what country would it be?
Hey, Kathleen.
Thank you. If I had to live in another country, what country would it be? there are some really, really fun choices. I've been to some countries in Europe that I thoroughly enjoyed, Italy and France, Spain, London, England, some fabulous places. My favorite place, though, that I have traveled was Costa Rica. I would choose Costa Rica for a couple of reasons. One, because I really would love to learn Spanish, and what a great opportunity I would have to do so there. Also, I have great memories of Costa Rica. My husband and I, before we were married, went down there together. In fact, that's where we got engaged, now that I think about it. Before anyone had discovered Costa Rica, it was more than 30 years ago. There were very few English speakers. In fact, my first experience after we rented a car, and heaven knows why we did that in a foreign country, we rented a car and drove up to this volcano, and we stopped for some seafood on the way. Two bad things happened after that. First was I got pulled over by the police. And in Costa Rica, they don't have little handguns like on their belts. They've got these big, giant weapons they carry up to your car. I didn't know any Spanish, and he gave up on me eventually and sent us on our way. We didn't get too much further before the second thing happened, which was my husband had eaten some seafood and he became violently ill. He crawled up the stairs to our hotel room, where he lay for 36 hours as I went down with my weak Spanish into the bar, asking for mineral water, which, by the way, is agua minerale. I still remember that. I would still choose Costa Rica, even after those experiences. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you, Vicki. Thank you. I mean, Kathleen. Boy, if you could be any sea animal, what would you be and why?
Yay, Lloyd.
This is gonna be fun.
A sea animal. I'm going to broaden the definition of sea animal and go with hippopotamus. They're not exactly sea animals because I don't think they'd enjoy swimming in salt water, but close enough. They swim in water. So I declare a hippopotamus to be a sea animal. The reason I'm picking that is that one time when we were at SeaWorld in San Diego, they had a hippopotamus, or no, we were at the zoo, now that I think about it. They had this display or habitat for the hippopotamus that involved kind of like a fake riverbank is what it amounted to. The hippo was on that, but he could go down into the water, and there was a way to go around on a sidewalk to be below the level of water. It's kind of like an aquarium. But what I liked about the hippo is that when he got in the water, every other animal there was got out. Hippos are not the kind of animal you want to mess with. One reason is that they're very, very ill-tempered. They look kind of slow and lumpy and whatnot. They're not. They're very fast. I learned later that hippos kill more people in Africa than any other animal, including the predator animals like lions and whatnot. So I think I'd go with hippo because, you know, no one would give me any crap.
Well, that's kind of stretching the definition of sea animal, but the speaker. Vicki, if you had a time machine, what part of history would you go back to?
Yay, Vicki.
If I had a time machine, what time in history would I go back to? That's interesting because I do like the comforts of our environment now. I'm not sure that I would like some of those other comforts, but I think it would be interesting perhaps to go to the Roman times when they had the Colosseum and the Olympics and all of that type of competitiveness, and to see that in person. And just then, if I could time travel, then see the evolution perhaps of how the start of these Olympics started And then coming up February of this upcoming year, see how much they've changed. I bet that there's very few events that are left from the original Olympics, especially since I'm assuming that in Roman times, they were more during warmer weather type of like running and such, whereas with the Winter Olympics, because they've split them now, it's just not the same. But if I had to go back in that time, I think I would choose the Roman times when they had the Olympics. Back to you, Pat.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Vicki. Carl, do you feel like taking one? You can decline if you want to.
It's okay, it's in numbers.
So
I respectfully decline.
you respectfully decline. In that case, I'm going to ask Fabiola. If you could be world class in any sport, what would it be and why?
Yay, Fabiola.
Thank you for the question. If I could be any world-class, do any world-class sport, what would it be and why? I would say downhill skiing. I have attempted to downhill ski twice in my life. Once when I was approximately 12, my uncle took myself and my brother to the slopes up in Chelan, and we were having a fabulous time and I really enjoyed it. And the whole time that I was skiing, my mother was at the bottom of the hill screaming at me, yelling at me and telling me to get down because she was very concerned that I was going to get hurt. The second time that I went skiing was in college. My friends convinced me to go to Schweitzer for a weekend trip. And we went skiing. We did a 3-day trip. And the first 2 days, it was very foggy. And I don't know where they took me, but I could not see where I was skiing and I had a great time. The last day, it was beautiful, sunny, and they supposedly took me to the same area that we skied the other 2 days. And I could not believe that I had skied down these hills, and I demanded to go to the bunny hill. So the third day, I spent my day on the bunny hill because I was really scared that I was going to hurt myself, and I actually did. I was conquering the bunny hill and turned to my friend and started laughing at her because I was conquering the hill, and I ran into a tree and almost broke my nose. So I have not skied ever since then, but if I was able to gain a skill and become a world-class professional in a sport, it would be downhill skiing without breaking my nose. Thank you.
That sounds like a worthy transition because you don't want to break anything. Jacob, what would you do for fun if you were stranded on a desert island?
Hey, Jacob.
Thank you for that question, Madam Table Topics Master. Read. I love to read. And although understandably that if I ended up on a desert island, I probably wouldn't have any books available to read. If I had my choice, I would have all of the books available to read and I would spend my days reading. I love nothing more than to get lost in a good book. And I adore the idea of just not having to go anywhere or do anything or be anybody other than a person who sits on a beach and gets to read a book every day. That would be the life. That would be the great life. So I would like to read. Thank you for that question.
All right.
Yay, Jacob.
Barbara, I haven't called on you.
No.
All right. Barbara, where is the worst place that you could get trapped?
Wow. Thank you for that question, Madam Table Topics Master. I'm sorry, could you repeat it one more time? Where?
Yes. Where is the worst place that you could get trapped?
Where is the worst place I could get trapped? There's so many. I'm trying to decide which one would be I have to say, I'm a small-ish town girl. And I enjoy living on the outskirts of town, surrounded by property and surrounded by wildlife. So with that, I'm gonna go with one of the worst places for me to be trapped would be Washington, DC, or a city such as like that. I know many people love Washington, DC, but I had a terrible experience when I visited. And believe me, there was lots of wonderful things to visit and see while I was there. But I also had numerous panic attacks because I couldn't see outward. There was just cement everywhere. And I really couldn't see the mountains or the treetops. And it was very distressful for me while I was in Washington, DC. And in fact, I was actually visiting the Martin Luther King Jr. Library, and I had a meeting in the basement, and I had to leave because even there, the ceiling was so low. I just felt trapped. Again, Washington, DC has wonderful things, and I recommend everybody at least visit once to see the sights and look at part of our history, but that would be the worst place for me to turn. Thank you, Table Topics Master.
Okay, well, everyone has had the opportunity to do at least one. I have plenty of more questions, and we have another 15 minutes for this component. Shall we go on?
I'll do another one.
Are you volunteering?
Yes,
Good,
yes.
okay. So, what is the first thing you notice when it comes to someone from the opposite gender?
Oh, that's a loaded one. It's a great question, though.
Very true. Thank you for that question, Madam Table Topics Master. I think the first thing I notice when I meet someone from the opposite sex is if they are confident. I can tell by the way they walk towards me, the way they stride towards me, I can tell if they're a confident individual. That's probably the very first thing I notice. However, there are other attributes of the opposite sex that do attract my attention as well. Generally, it's if they're a long-legged woman. I really like tall women. So that's probably the first thing I notice. After I notice if they have a confident stride when they come towards me. And honestly, that is all I'm going to say about that.
Any other volunteers? I'm looking for volunteers. Oh, okay, Jacob. Here you go, Jacob. What's the craziest thing that happened when you went to school?
Oh, thank you, Madam Table Topics Master. The craziest thing that's ever happened to me at school would probably be the time so the backstory of this story, I will start there. There's a man, a politician in Idaho named Tom Luna, who is notorious for being a member of the very, very, very conservative educational party who wanted to cut a lot of funding to education. And at the time, I knew about him and I knew what he looked like. And he came into our school to talk to some of our classes about our programs. And I may have, in the middle of his speech, realized who he was. And I may or may not have stood up and declared him to be Looney Luna, and that his policies were lunacy, and that I was not going to listen to any more of them. And I promptly walked out of the gymnasium and slammed the door behind me. And then I had to sit in school suspension for 3 days while my principal laughed at me because he thought it was really funny, but he had to punish me somehow. So that's the craziest thing I've ever done, was insult a politician in school. Yes.
Thank you, thank you. I'm still looking for volunteers. I've got questions. Okay,
Fabiola, Kathleen.
Fabiola and then Kathleen, okay. Fabiola, if you won $1 million on the lottery, what would you spend it on?
Thank you for that question. I've actually thought of this question many, many times because I do buy lottery tickets. However, I never check them. I check them a year or two once they expire. Therefore, I don't know if I've ever won the lottery. However, if I ever was to win the lottery, I have informed my immediate family that the first thing I would do would be to take care of their debts. I want them to all begin their lives with a debt-free. And therefore, the funny thing is that my brother always wants to know if I win the lottery because he wants to go buy a house and a car and all these fabulous things before I pay off the debts. But that would be my first priority would be to pay off my family's debts and help them become debt-free. And then also purchase some property for some of my family that rents. I want them to have their appropriate housing, and also make some donations to some charities, my church, build some scholarship funds because I love education. I believe in education, and I would like to be able to provide funding for all students to access education. So looking at foundations, looking at charities, and paying off my family's debts would be what my priorities would be. And then if I have a balance after that, it would be to invest it so that my kids and my grandkids and so forth would be able to have some funds as well to have a comfortable life. Thank you for that question.
Thank you, thank
Hey,
you.
Fabiola.
Hey, Kathleen, you volunteered. If you could eat only one meal for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Hey,
One
Kathleen.
meal for the rest of my life. The first thing I want to say is I'd like to be part of Fabiola's family. Want to know how to get in right now. In terms of your question, gosh, my favorite food, this is embarrassing, is popcorn. I love popcorn. When I was a little girl and we traveled to visit our family, we were in Washington, D.C., and we would go to Omaha, Nebraska. When we got there, my grandmother had this big black cast iron skillet with the glass lid and the little vent on it. And every Sunday night, she would make popcorn in this cast iron skillet. Our family had popcorn every Sunday night. It was a ritual the whole time I was growing up. There's something about the crunch to popcorn. Now I like it way too much. I could eat it every single day. I think that would not be good for me. I've stretched into areas where now I make it with olive oil. Oh, and I don't put it in the microwave. No. I make it with olive oil in a pan like my grandmother did, although she never used olive oil. She probably used lard. I put salt and pepper on it. That makes me feel like it's healthy. Olive oil, salt, and pepper. Probably not that healthy. It is truly my favorite thing, and I have to be careful because I would eat it every single day. My second favorite thing, when I was younger, before I was married, my favorite dinner was popcorn and jelly beans. Not fancy Jelly Bellies, the old-fashioned jelly beans that are just nothing but clumps of sugar that are colored. And some of them, maybe the black ones, have just a little bit of flavor. The rest of them don't have any flavor. Those two things, that would be my last meal and my favorite meal, jelly beans and popcorn. Thank you, Pat.
Well, thank you for that dissertation on health food. Any other volunteers? Anybody else? Oh, Vicky, okay. Vicky, if you could be any bird, what would you be and why?
Hey, Vicky.
If I could be any bird, what would I be and why? That is something that I have not considered too much. I think Even though I would like to perhaps be a bird that hangs out by the ocean, I really think that I would actually have to choose to be an eagle, just because I find that their stature is very beautiful. And when they fly, they just have a grace about them. When you see them in the sky and they just seem to be checking out their surrounding, kind of as though they are monitoring it to make sure that everything is going the way it's supposed to go. They just have a way about them, and they can be either by themselves or with others. And I'm the type of person that is okay being by myself for a while, whereas some birds seem to flock together and others are ones that will stay away and be by themselves. So that is an interesting question, Pat. I haven't considered myself as a bird. I've thought of very many other animals, but thank you for that question.
Well, thank you for your response. Any more volunteers? We have 2 minutes, or we could end this part of our program. Okay, well, thank you for your various creative responses, and we'll move onward.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pat, for our table topics. And those were wonderful responses. It was really interesting to hear all the different responses from everyone. Thank you. At this time, I would like to go ahead and return it to Rob, our general evaluator.
Thank you, Fabiola. We had some music in the background. We were all listening to that. It was very nice music. I would now like to ask Lloyd Smith to come up and evaluate Jacob's icebreaker speech. Lloyd.
Thank you. Before I begin, Carl, you probably figured this out by now, but the meeting is divided into 3 components. There are prepared speeches like Jacob did. There are impromptu speeches, the table topics, and then there's the evaluation portion. Evaluation is important. There's no point in practicing something unless you find out how well you did. But there are no grades in Toastmasters. So I will start by saying that this is my personal opinion of Jacob's speech. Your mileage may vary. But Jacob, there was a lot to like about this speech, I thought. The main thing was the speech concept. You chose to let a story carry your theme as opposed to doing an expository type speech. That's really a good idea because humans are natural storytellers and story listeners. And everybody wants to find out what happened, is what it amounts to with the story. So excellent job with that. The second thing they did really well was the way you employed vocal variety. You are very lucky to have a voice that's easy to listen to. But in addition to that, you used it very expressively. I thought really good job with that. The third thing was your visual detail in your speech. It was just layered with lots of visual language. That's really a key thing because that's what adds verisimilitude to the speech. It made the story seem real. So all in all, the speech was extremely well written, and I thought in general well delivered too. Now, things you might want to work on. These will sound like small things because they are. First of all, the lighting. You're kind of oddly lit. I recommend you watch the video on this. You'll see the reflection of your monitor in the glasses is blue. Your face is lighted, which is good, but the rest of the room was kind of dimly lighted. It gave you kind of a disembodied head look every now and then. You might want to turn on some lights in the background or something. Experiment and see what happens. Your gestures, you were gesturing quite often, but they came up out of the bottom of the Zoom box and then would just disappear. And that's a limitation of Zoom. There's really no way to get around it, but it is something to think about. For a little while in your speech, I think you were looking down at notes. I wasn't positive about that, but that's the impression I got. You know, in this kind of a speech, you're the only person who knows what you're going to say. And so even if you got off track or something, no one will notice. You might as well just keep going without having to look at notes. You were motoring along pretty rapidly. I know, I think you had, well, to me, you felt like you were a little closer to the 4 minute than 6 minutes. So you had the time. You might want to slow down a bit and introduce some pauses at the important points of the speech. Finally, your ending, your conclusion was extremely abrupt. I don't think anyone here noticed it until you said something like, thank you or whatever. So, a sentence or two of a conclusion would be a good thing. To challenge yourself, obviously more speeches. I'm really looking forward to your next one. And then practice those little performance delays. The good news is that the performance aspects are easy to fix. The writing aspects, creating and crafting the speeches are hard to do, but you've got a really good handle on that. So all in all, nice job.
Thank you, Lloyd. Vicki, are you prepared to give us a report, the timer's report?
I am prepared.
Wonderful. The floor is yours.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. General Evaluator. Jacob, Lloyd was correct. 4 minutes. It was like you were done. It was like almost that you timed it over and over and over again so that you could end it. 4 minutes. Rob, your table topics, 207, Kathleen 216, Lloyd 118, myself 120, Fabiola 203, Jacob 38 seconds, Barbara 145, and then we started over again with Rob 101, being very careful to just stop where he stopped. Jacob, your next one was 119. I was surprised that you had more to say about your school than reading because you enjoy reading so much. Fabiola, 140, Kathleen, 210, mine was 118, and Lloyd, it's almost as though you practiced your evaluation to end at 3 minutes exactly. Good job. Back to you, Mr. General Evaluator.
Thank you, Vicki. I'm now going to ask Barbara to come up and give us her combined report as the grammarian and the odd counter. Welcome, Barbara.
No, Kathleen was the odd counter.
Oh, I apologize. Let me rephrase. I would like to invite Barbara to come up and give her grammarian report. Barbara?
For our grammarian report, I want to first off apologize. I did not actually give out a word of the day. So that was a misstep on my part. But we did have great use. I did not notice any terrible use of the grammar this evening. Some good use of it. Authentic self. Jacob really enjoyed that because it's something that if you haven't learned in the last 2 years, you certainly learn as you grow older to be and to trust your authentic self. I also liked your sentence timelines intersected and became one. Beautiful, beautiful sentence there. Fabiola, I have to question where you said I was conquering the bunny hill, but you still broke your nose. I might have to use a different term in conquering. And Jacob, I can appreciate when you say person who gets to sit on a beach and read. Of course, being a librarian, I have to say that, I have to notice that. Kathleen, I enjoyed your sentence. My last meal would be popcorn and jelly beans. I just had this image of you in your last meal. And of course, and then Lloyd, a couple of uses of your words is choose to stay. You chose a story to carry your theme. I really like that idea. And it just puts a visual to what that looks like. And then also motoring along pretty rapidly, as I also do myself. So thank you. That is my grammarian report.
Wonderful. Thank you, Barbara. Kathleen, do we actually have some ahs in the room, or were we all perfect?
Oh, just a few.
I'll let you go ahead and share that report with us, Kathleen.
Thank you, Mr. General Evaluator. We had a really good night, I thought, in terms of filler words. Our favorite filler word as a group is and. I'm a little tough on and. it's a word that can be really useful to string thoughts together. But if it's stringing more than 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 thoughts together, it's being overused. We were all guilty in some regards. I'm going to start with Jacob. Jacob, I did your speech separately from your table topics. Your speech was awesome. 2 ums, 2 so's. Congratulations. Table topics, for Carl's benefit, are always more difficult, and we tend to fall back on our filler words as we do table topics. Jacob, 3 ums, 4 ands, 3 so's, 1 repetition. Not bad. You did 2 table topics. Fabiola, great job. 2 uhs, ums, 1 so, 1 but. You had reliance on ands a little bit. Big improvement, I was thinking as I was listening to you and marking my sheet, that you've really improved since you joined our group. Congratulations on that. Pat, either I wasn't listening to you or you were clean. There's nothing next to your name. Rob, good job. Rob is always hard to catch. I listened to him intently because he's so good at this. I managed to extract 1 1 and 2 so's. I had to work very hard at it though. Lloyd, good job tonight. 2 ums, 3 so's. Vicky, 4 ums, 2 ands, a so and a but. Barbara, I only docked you for 2 ands. I docked myself for several ands and an If I didn't read your name and you spoke, you must be clean. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. I know that I'm going to reiterate something I said earlier, and that is the role that I play tonight as the general evaluator. Again, my role is to introduce the team in our meeting this evening, and more importantly, to evaluate the meeting as a whole. I was thoroughly impressed with the meeting tonight, especially with people stepping up and taking on roles at the last minute. For our club, when we don't have as many people show up as normal, it's refreshing when people do that. I really appreciate the fact that everybody stepped up and filled the roles that needed to be filled. Carl, I'm thrilled that you're here tonight as our guest. I hope you will come back. It's not unusual for guests to try and ease into this with the table topics, so don't feel like that was an issue, because it certainly was not, and we hope you'll come back. Jacob, fantastic speech. Good golly, I look forward to hearing more speeches from you. I was thoroughly impressed. I'm looking forward to more speeches in the future. Pat, great questions tonight, except for that zinger that you gave me in my second table topics question. I probably said too much, even though my second response was less than a minute, or right around a minute. I learned more about people in our club tonight than I think I have in a long time. I learned more about hippos and eagles and popcorn and jelly beans, and how those things influence various members of our club. So I really appreciated that tonight. All in all, the meeting went very well. I look forward to next week. And that's my report. Thank you. At this point, I would like to invite our president to come back up to the podium. Madam President.
Thank you. Again, I just want to thank everybody for coming tonight, for everybody who showed up to the library, and also for our guest for joining us. We meet here at the same time every week, and please encourage your friends and family to attend. So thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned.
Carl, off and make some popcorn.
One final comment. If you have a theme that you're really interested in hearing from a table topics perspective, please let me know. Because I'm running out of options.
Ooh.
If you have something you'd like me to put on the agenda next week, I'm all ears. Thank you.
Carl,
Yeah, go ahead.
Carl, just wanted to let you know we are not meeting on the 27th. We decided that last meeting and you weren't here. So wanted to tell you that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. All right, everyone. Have a good evening.